The Zorth Empire had known nothing but dominance for eons. Their fleets stretched across the stars like a web of iron and fire. Nothing in their path had ever slowed them down. Their technology was unmatched, their weapons lethal, their strategies flawless. Every species they encountered was either crushed beneath their heel or assimilated into their fold. There was no threat in the galaxy that could stand against them, no rebellion that could endure. Every world they touched bent to their will. The Zorth believed themselves to be the natural rulers of the cosmos, and nothing could ever change that belief. From the capital world of Zorth Prime, the leaders of the Empire surveyed their domain with cold satisfaction. The Grand Council convened in their towering war rooms high above the planet's surface. As they gazed down upon the sprawling cityscape below, it was a symbol of their unchallenged might. Every building a monument to their power, every street a reminder of their perfect order. The generals and scientists who made up the council were a proud breed, their eyes cold and calculating, their hands steady as they moved across maps of star systems and military deployments. They were never surprised, because nothing ever challenged their supremacy. One of the generals spoke loudly, breaking the silence. The Empire is secure, all regions under control. There is no threat to our rule. The others nodded in agreement. The data was irrefutable. Their intelligence network was vast. Their fleets had eradicated any would-be challengers. There was no one left to oppose them. The galaxy was theirs, and theirs alone. The Empire had been at peace for centuries. There was no reason to believe anything would disrupt the order they had created. But as the Council continued its discussions, a small flicker appeared on the far edges of their galactic sensors, a dot barely visible at first, almost too faint to register a lone vessel. It was too far from any known system to be part of their empire, and too small to be of any consequence. Yet the sensors pinged again. The dot was moving closer toward Zorth space. The general in charge of galactic security raised an eyebrow, dismissing the report as a minor glitch. Another rogue ship drifting through the outer rim. It was nothing to worry about. The flicker became a blip, then another. A larger object was moving steadily toward them. It wasn't a normal trajectory. A few more reports came in, and the general's expression began to shift. A sense of unease started to build in his mind. This wasn't just a wandering vessel. It was heading directly toward the heart of their empire, and it was fast, too fast for a ship of its size to move through hyperspace without drawing attention. The council room grew quiet as the data continued to stream in. The unknown ship was moving in ways that defied conventional navigation techniques. It was almost as if it knew exactly where it was going. Every maneuver was deliberate, precise. The Zorth were not accustomed to being caught off guard. Their warships had always been faster, stronger, more advanced than anything else in the galaxy. But this unknown force, it was different. A few minutes later, a fleet of ships was dispatched to intercept this intruder. Without hesitation, the Zorth had no time to waste. Whatever it was, they would crush it as they had crushed all who came before. Yet there was something lingering in the back of their minds, a question they didn't dare voice. Could this be something more than just another nuisance? The fleet of Zorth warships, massive and formidable, jumped to hyperspace with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their engines humming in perfect synchronization as they moved toward the unknown intruder. Each vessel was a work of art, an apex of destructive technology, bristling with weapons capable of eradicating entire worlds. They were designed for domination, and they had never faced a challenge they couldn't crush. The Zorth commanders issued their orders with cold detachment, confident that this would be nothing more than a routine engagement. As they approached the last known coordinates of the mysterious ship, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace, and for a brief moment, there was nothing but the vast emptiness of space stretching before them. Then, in the distance, a shape began to emerge, dark, sleek, and impossibly fast. It was not the shape of any ship the Zorth had encountered before. Its design was unfamiliar, alien in a way that sent a chill down the spines of even the most hardened warriors. It was not just an anomaly. It felt wrong, as though it belonged to another reality altogether. The lead ship's captain, an experienced veteran named General Krynak, immediately ordered the fleet to form a standard battle formation, trusting in their overwhelming numbers. They were the predators here. The enemy would fall in line like all the others. Yet as the unknown vessel grew closer, something strange happened. The ship didn't flee. It didn't engage in evasive maneuvers as expected. Instead, it seemed to be waiting, as if it was daring the Zorth to make the first move. Krenek sneered, too confident in their superiority to be afraid. "Engage the enemy," he commanded, his voice firm. The Zorth ships began to fire, powerful energy blasts lighting up the void as they unleashed everything they had at the intruder. The unknown vessel absorbed the blasts with ease, its shields shimmering but holding firm. The Zorth commanders exchanged confused glances. This was impossible. No shield could withstand such concentrated firepower. But before they could react, the unknown ship made its move. In a flash, the human warship accelerated, darting forward with a speed that left the Zorth in awe. It was not just fast, it was unpredictable. It weaved and turned with a grace that made the Zorth ships look sluggish and clumsy. Each move seemed calculated, as though the ship knew exactly where the Zorth would strike next, and was always one step ahead. The Zorth fired again and again, but the unknown vessel slipped through the barrage of energy blasts like a shadow, never staying in the same place long enough for the Zorth to land a hit. Then came the surprise. Without warning, the human ship retaliated. The first shot was so fast that Krenek barely had time to react. The beam of energy pierced through the shields of the lead Zorth ship, cutting through its hull like a knife through butter. The ship exploded in a flash of light, and debris scattered in every direction. The fleet froze in shock. They had never seen anything like this. This was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The human vessel moved with eerie precision, disabling ship after ship in a series of targeted strikes. Zorth ships tried to regroup, to mount a defense, but it was as if the human ship was anticipating their every move. It was too fast, too smart. The Zorth fleet was falling apart. They had no idea how to fight an enemy like this. General Krenek's voice wavered as he tried to regain control of the situation. Fall back. Retreat. But it was too late. The Zorth were already in full retreat, fleeing from a fight they had never expected to lose. The human warship had shown them the truth. This was not an enemy to be underestimated. It was an enemy they could not defeat. The news of the defeat rippled across the Zorth Empire like a shockwave. For the first time in centuries, the great empire found itself trembling in the face of an adversary that had not only survived their initial assault, but had obliterated their finest fleet with terrifying efficiency. The reports flooded in from every sector, and the details were chilling. The human warship had proven far more advanced than anything the Zorth had ever encountered, not just in firepower, but in tactics, speed, and adaptability. Worse still, the humans were not content with merely striking. They had sent a clear message across the galaxy. "We are here." The simplicity of the message was as chilling as it was powerful. The humans weren't offering threats or demands. They were declaring their presence, staking their claim on the galaxy as though it were theirs for the taking. The Zorth Empire, whose reach had once been limitless, now found itself facing the impossible. An unknown enemy that refused to bend and that had the power to break the foundations of their empire. In the council chambers of Zorth Prime, the leaders were in chaos. No one knew what to make of the human threat. The generals who had once confidently sat at the helm of the galaxy's most powerful empire now squirmed in their seats, their eyes darting around the room, unwilling to meet the gaze of their fellow leaders. They had all heard the reports. The warship that had torn through their fleets like paper, the uncanny precision of its strikes, the speed that no known ship could match. They had all seen the same thing. The humans were no longer a mere curiosity. They were a force to be reckoned with. General Krenek, the same officer who had led the ill-fated assault, stood at the front of the room, his face pale and drawn. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "We are facing an unknown enemy, a species we have never encountered before. Their technology is beyond anything we possess. We must act quickly to neutralize this threat before they can gain more ground." But even as he spoke, doubt lingered in the air. The Zorth had never known fear, but now it was palpable. They had never faced a challenge like this, a species so bold, so audacious. The idea that a single warship could bring their empire to its knees seemed unfathomable, yet the evidence was undeniable. The Council's lead scientist, a sharp-eyed individual named Loria, stepped forward, breaking the silence that had descended upon the room. The human warship, it wasn't just technologically superior, it was adaptive. It responded to our attacks in ways that should have been impossible. I've analyzed the wreckage, and there's something about their design, something we cannot replicate. Loria paused, her words sinking in as the room fell silent. The Zorth had always prided themselves on their technological mastery. Their warships were marvels of engineering, capable of enduring the harshest of conditions and delivering destructive force, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And yet, against this human warship, they were nothing. A few stray shots, and their most advanced ships had been torn apart like toys. General Krenac's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. So we are not just facing the superior force. We are facing something we cannot even begin to understand. His voice was low, but the fear in it was unmistakable. How do we fight something like that? Loria's answer was blunt. We don't. Not yet. Not until we understand their tactics. Until we learn what drives them. The humans don't fight like we do. They don't follow the same rules. She looked around the room, her eyes intense. We need to learn. We need to evolve. But there was little time for further discussion. Across the galaxy, a new message from the humans was broadcast. A simple, chilling message, delivered in the same calm tone as the first. Asterisk, we are coming. Asterisk. The Zorth Council was no longer simply on alert. They were in full-blown panic. The humans were coming. And this time, they weren't going to wait to be attacked. They were coming to conquer. The Zorth Empire was in turmoil. Across the galaxy, fleets scrambled to respond to the growing threat. The message from the humans had made it clear. Their presence was not a fleeting incident. They weren't here to negotiate or submit to the Zorth's rule. They were here to take what they wanted, and they were not afraid to fight for it. The first major confrontation came at Scarth, a key Zorth-occupied planet known for its rich resources and strategic importance. The planet was well protected, surrounded by a formidable fleet of Zorth warships. This was supposed to be a stronghold, a place where the Empire's might could crush any opposition. But when the humans arrived, it was anything but a conventional attack. Zorth generals were quick to react. They mobilized their forces, activating planetary defenses and dispatching their most battle-hardened ships to the front lines. As the Zorth ships prepared to engage, the human warship appeared out of nowhere, cutting through the atmosphere with a sudden, blinding speed. The fleet that had once been confident in its ability to repel any attack now found itself caught off guard. The humans didn't give them time to think. The battle unfolded unlike any the Zorth had ever fought. The human ship darted across the skies of Scarth with incredible agility, launching precise attacks that seemed to anticipate every defensive maneuver the Zorth fleet made. The Zorth ships opened fire, but their weapons couldn't seem to find their target. The human ship was too quick, too unpredictable. It wasn't simply outmaneuvering them, it was outsmarting them. For the first time in centuries, the Zorth found themselves in disarray. Their coordinated assault fell apart as each ship was picked off one by one. The humans weren't just using superior speed. They were attacking with pinpoint accuracy, disabling weapon systems and engines, rendering Zorth ships useless without even destroying them outright. The strategy was baffling to the Zorth. Why not just annihilate them? Why take them apart piece by piece? Within hours, the tide had turned. The Zorth fleet, once a symbol of unstoppable might, was retreating in full panic, their pride shattered. The humans, despite their relatively small numbers, had wreaked havoc on their forces, using hit-and-run tactics that the Zorth were ill-equipped to counter. As the human ship made its final pass, it released a devastating EMP burst that knocked out the Zorth's primary communications, throwing their entire command structure into chaos. General Krenak, now far from the safety of Zorth Prime, watched the reports from the front lines with growing disbelief. The humans had done the impossible. They had shattered their military's cohesion and left the once feared fleet in tatters. The Zorth commanders were scattered, unable to regroup in time to mount a counterattack. The planet, Scarth, was left in the hands of the humans. As the last remnants of the Zorth fleet limped away, the human warship stood alone in the void, a silent sentinel above the ruined world. Krenak seethed with frustration, but he knew there was no escaping the truth. This was not the battle they had anticipated. The humans had proven themselves to be far more than just a nuisance. They were a serious threat, one that the Zorth weren't prepared for. Back on Zorth Prime, the Council's leaders gathered once more. They were no longer dismissing the human threat. The destruction at Scarth had proven something the Zorth could not ignore. The humans were adaptable, relentless, and ruthless in ways the Zorth had never seen. They were not following the script. They were writing their own story, and that story was one in which the Zorth were no longer the main characters. We underestimated them, General Krenak admitted bitterly, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. And now we are paying the price. The loss at Scarth had sent shockwaves throughout the Zorth Empire. A sense of fear began to spread, creeping into the hearts of commanders, generals, and council members alike. The once unshakable confidence of the Zorth was now tainted with doubt. Their entire military doctrine, honed over eons, had been thrown into disarray by a single human warship. And the worst part, the humans didn't stop at Scarth. They were spreading across the galaxy with terrifying efficiency. On Zorth Prime, the Council was in a state of panic. The defeat at Scarth had revealed just how vulnerable they were. For the first time, they weren't just dealing with another rebellion or alien species. This was an existential threat. The humans weren't just challenging the Zorth's military power. They were threatening the very foundation of their empire. The lead scientist, Loria, who had once been the voice of reason and caution, now spoke with an urgency that sent a chill down the spines of everyone in the room. We cannot ignore them any longer. The humans are not just another race to conquer. They are something else entirely. Their tactics, their technology. It's beyond anything we've seen. We need to adapt, or we will lose everything. General Krenak stood at the head of the table, his face hardened by the weight of failure. He was a seasoned warrior, but even he could feel the unease in the air. The Zorth had faced countless enemies, but none had been like this. None had fought with such ferocity, with such intelligence. The humans weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. We need to understand them, Krenak said, his voice low but resolute. We cannot defeat them by brute force alone. We need to know how they think, how they fight. We need to turn this around. Loria nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the data screens that surrounded the council room. We've been analyzing the human tactics since the battle at Scarth. There's a pattern, an intelligence behind their every move. We don't just need more ships. We need more knowledge. A tense silence followed her words. The Zorth had never been a species to rely on anything but their strength and advanced technology. Their entire way of life had been built around the belief that power would always win. But now they had to acknowledge something they had never considered. Intelligence, adaptability, and strategy might be just as powerful as raw force. Krenak slammed his fist onto the table, causing the council members to jump. Enough analysis. We need action. We need to strike at the heart of their forces. We can't sit here and wait for them to make the next move. We will destroy them, and we will do it now. The council agreed reluctantly, but even as they gave the order for a new military campaign, there was an undercurrent of fear among them. How could they strike at something they didn't fully understand? How could they hope to defeat an enemy that seemed always one step ahead? The Zorth had been supreme for millennia, But in this moment, they were no longer sure of their invincibility. Meanwhile, the humans were not sitting idly by. They were continuing their campaign, their warship appearing at the edges of Zorth space with alarming frequency. Their message remained clear, unspoken, but undeniable. We are taking what is ours, and there is nothing you can do to stop us. The Zorth had underestimated the humans, but that mistake would soon cost them more than they could imagine. They had provoked a force they didn't fully comprehend, and the consequences of that miscalculation were only beginning to unfold. As the Zorth prepared for their counteroffensive, they were unaware that the humans had already anticipated their every move. The humans were no longer just an enemy to be defeated. They had become something far more dangerous, an idea. And that idea was spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. The Zorth Empire, once the most feared and dominant force in the galaxy, now found itself trapped in a relentless cycle of counterattacks. The humans, though still seemingly few in number, had managed to achieve what no one had thought possible. Their tactics were unpredictable, and their warship, an enigma in itself, was everywhere, appearing at the most unexpected places, striking swiftly, and disappearing before the Zorth could mount an effective defense. Zorth Prime was on high alert as General Krenak's forces prepared for their decisive offensive. The new strategy was simple: overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. They had underestimated the humans once before. This time, they would not make the same mistake. A vast fleet, equipped with their most powerful warships and surrounded by battalions of ground forces, was mobilized. But even as the fleet gathered, a creeping sense of unease hung over the Zorth military leadership. Every intelligence report they received suggested one thing: the humans were already aware of their plans. They had somehow anticipated the Zorth's every move, every strategy. The humans were always one step ahead, and that was what terrified the Zorth most. "General Krenak, the fleet is ready for deployment," a voice reported, but there was no sense of triumph in it. It was hollow, a formality. Krenak turned to face the officer, his eyes cold, but filled with uncertainty. "How do we proceed?" Krenak asked, his voice gruff. "We move forward as planned, sir," the officer replied. "But we've detected human ships in the region. We believe they are already positioning themselves to strike." Krenak clenched his fists. "It's impossible. We've outnumbered them 10-1. They can't have assembled a force that quick." But in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that the humans had already won, before the battle had even begun. As the Zorth fleet moved forward into the vast expanse of space surrounding the Zorth-controlled sectors, they were greeted not with resistance, but with silence. For hours, there was nothing but the stars and the feeling of tension building in every officer's chest. The absence of human ships on their scanners only heightened their paranoia. It was too quiet. Then, without warning, the human warship appeared out of nowhere, right in the middle of the fleet. It was impossible. No ship could move that fast, let alone jump into the middle of a prepared military formation without being detected. But there it was, as though it had simply materialized from thin air. The Zorth ships immediately opened fire, but the human warship was already weaving through the incoming blasts. It moved with such speed and agility that even the most experienced commanders couldn't track it properly. Every shot missed, every effort to close in failed. The human ship darted between Zorth warships, striking swiftly and disabling them one by one. In the chaos, the Zorth fleet attempted to regroup, but the human ship wasn't done yet. It released a series of smaller drones, each one fast and deadly, attaching themselves to the larger Zorth ships. The drones cut through shields and hulls like paper, releasing targeted explosions that crippled the Zorth's warships. In minutes, what had been a massive fleet was reduced to a scattering of wreckage and debris. General Krenak watched helplessly from his flagship as his forces were obliterated. He had underestimated the humans again, but this time, the consequences were much worse. The humans weren't just capable of fighting. They were redefining the rules of warfare itself. They didn't fight for survival. They fought to win. "They are not just soldiers," Krenak muttered, his voice filled with awe and dread. "They are a force of nature." The Zorth Empire was crumbling beneath the weight of their own hubris. The humans were no longer just invaders. They were becoming a symbol of something greater, a spark of rebellion against a once invincible empire. The galaxy was beginning to shift, and there was nothing the Zorth could do to stop it. Back at Zorth Prime, as the loss of yet another fleet echoed through the corridors, the Council was forced to acknowledge the truth. The humans were not just here to fight. They were here to conquer, to take the galaxy from the Zorth, and they would not rest until they had succeeded. And the Zorth were running out of time. The devastation of the Zorth fleet was only the beginning. The humans had proven their capabilities time and time again, each encounter more lethal and precise than the last. But now something far more dangerous was emerging from the ashes of the shattered Zorth forces, a united front from the galaxy's oppressed species, inspired by the relentless human advance. It began on the war-torn world of Draxia, a once prosperous planet now under the cruel rule of the Zorth. The people had lived in fear for decades, subjugated to the Empire's iron fist. But when the human warship appeared above their skies, the people of Draxia saw a glimmer of hope they hadn't dared to imagine. They'd heard the whispers of the humans' victories, of their defiance, of their unyielding drive. And now, standing under the shadow of a human warship, they understood the truth. The Zorth had never anticipated this, a spark of rebellion igniting across the galaxy, with humans at its core. On Draxia, the resistance forces rallied behind the human cause. With human weapons and technology, they struck at the heart of Zorth occupation forces, liberating cities one by one. The Zorth response was brutal, but for the first time in centuries, their efforts were met with unwavering resistance. The planet's long-oppressed people, once broken and silent, fought with newfound purpose. And in their wake, others followed. Worlds under the heel of the Zorth, worlds of every species, of every race, began to rise up. They had watched the humans tear through the Zorth fleets. They had seen their tenacity and intelligence. The galaxy was no longer the Zorth's to control. General Krenak, now back at Zorth Prime, was furious. The rebellion was spreading like wildfire. He had ordered the complete obliteration of Draxia. But by the time his forces arrived, the humans had already delivered a blow so crushing it would take the Zorth years to recover. The humans weren't just picking off the Zorth. They were rallying the oppressed, turning them into a force the Empire couldn't hope to match. But still, the Zorth refused to yield. Their pride, their arrogance, their centuries of dominance over the galaxy, they wouldn't be easily toppled. Krenak's orders were brutal. Destroy Draxia, destroy every planet that dared to resist, and crush the rebellion before it could spread any further. Yet, for all their might, the Zorth were beginning to understand that they were fighting a new kind of war. This was not the conquest they had known. This was not a war for territory. It was a war for hearts and minds. And in this new kind of war, the Zorth were outmatched. The human warship continued its relentless campaign, appearing in systems one after another, never giving the Zorth a chance to regroup. Each appearance was followed by a calculated, devastating strike, each move designed to make the Zorth question their place in the galaxy. And with every victory, the rebellion grew stronger, gaining the support of worlds that had once been too afraid to resist. In the command chambers of Zorth Prime, the atmosphere had turned desperate. The Zorth fleet was stretched thin, and there was no sign of a strategy that could turn the tide. Krenak was left staring at the star charts before him, a man who had spent his entire life studying the art of war, now at a complete loss. The humans had forced him to confront something that no Zorth warrior had ever been trained to fight. An idea, a movement that spread faster than their weapons could destroy. "General," a voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've intercepted another message from the humans." Krenak's eyes narrowed. What now? The transmission was brief but unmistakable. The humans were speaking directly to the Zorth now, and their message was simple. Asterisk, you can either surrender, or we will take everything. Asterisk. Krenak's fist slammed against the table in frustration. The humans were not just fighting. They were taunting, daring the Zorth to continue resisting. But now, as the galaxy burned with the fires of rebellion, one truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The Zorth were no longer in control. And in the heart of the Zorth Empire, General Krenak knew, deep down, that the human warship would not stop until they had broken the Empire completely. It was only a matter of time. The galaxy had changed. It wasn't just the Zorth Empire that had been shaken to its core. It was every world, every system, every species that had been caught in the struggle. Once again, it was not the raw might of the Zorth that would decide the future, but the human will and the fire they had ignited across the stars. In every corner of the galaxy, the message had been received. Resistance was possible. The Zorth had never faced a true rebellion before. Now, they were drowning in it. General Krenak, standing at the helm of the last remaining Zorth fleet, watched as the galaxy burned. The once imposing Zorth Empire, stretching across 100 worlds, now seemed nothing more than a crumbling fortress surrounded by enemies on all sides. The rebellion, empowered by the humans, had torn through the Empire's defenses like a wildfire, unstoppable and relentless. And the final blow was coming. It was a moment Krenak had both anticipated and dreaded. The humans, their warship now leading an entire armada of freed worlds, had arrived at the heart of the Empire. The last bastion of Zorth power, Zorth Prime, was under siege. There were no reinforcements, no surprises left to turn the tide. The Zorth fleet was too scattered, too weakened by the continuous onslaught. The humans were relentless, their intelligence and adaptability creating an unstoppable momentum. And now, the Empire's last line of defense was about to fall. The human fleet, massive and diverse, appeared in the orbit of Zorth Prime, its warships a stark contrast to the alien, nearly oppressive grandeur of Zorth ships. Each human vessel was unique, built with their signature efficiency and creativity. They had brought not only their own advanced technologies, but the strength of their allies, an army formed of those who had once been oppressed by the Zorth. The message was clear. This was not an invasion, but a liberation. Krenak's fingers trembled as he issued the orders to prepare for the final battle. The last defense platforms around Zorth Prime powered up, massive energy shields flickering to life as Zorth warships lined up, ready to face the human armada. The battle that followed was like no other the Zorth had fought. The human warships moved with a precision that was almost surgical, their strikes deadly yet measured. The Zorth tried to retaliate with all their might, but it was futile. The humans had outsmarted them at every turn, their weapons targeting weak points with terrifying accuracy. They were not simply fighting to win. They were fighting to break the Zorth forever. Krenak watched helplessly as the flagship of his fleet was torn apart by a coordinated attack. The sheer audacity of the humans, their ability to target his most valuable assets and cripple them, left him speechless. The fear he had felt earlier in the war now turned into a bitter realization. The Zorth could not win this. Their empire was done. In the heart of Zorth Prime, on the once Grand Council floors, the final meeting of the Zorth leadership was held. They had no choice but to surrender. General Krenak, standing before the council, felt as if he were a ghost in his own empire. They had once ruled the galaxy, but now they were nothing. The hollow shell of an empire, a fading memory. With the human fleet hovering above Zorth Prime, their message to the galaxy was clear. No empire, no species, was beyond reach. The Zorth had ruled the galaxy with fear, but the humans had conquered with something far more powerful: unity, intelligence, and determination. The warship that had started it all hovered above the capital, a symbol of victory, not just for humanity, but for every species that had been crushed beneath the Zorth boot. The Zorth Empire, once the epitome of power, had fallen. And now, the humans would reshape the galaxy.